Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hello, Justin Daniels here. I am a partner at the law firm Baker Donaldson. I work in tech transactions and mergers and acquisitions. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com.
Well, I just want our listeners to be aware of, Jody was in New York last week speaking at a art-related type of conference for artists and other folks, and they had this really cool picture of her right below this quote about how privacy is not about fines and compliance. It's really about a fundamental human right. If you haven't seen the picture on Jody's LinkedIn feed, it's really cool because it really encapsulates the mission of Red Clover.
Well, that was very kind. It was a lot of fun to be at that conference because some of you might know, but I used to do musical theater and sing, and before Glee was a show and cool. And now our younger daughter does the same. And it was really, really nice to be in a room full of arts organizations and digital marketers, from the fine arts to visual arts to performing arts. And we need more art than ever. So while I would love for you to see the quote and learn more about privacy, please also support your favorite arts organization.
And let us know by messaging Jody on LinkedIn if you want me to create a ChatGPT lyric for a privacy song, and maybe Jody will sing it a cappella.
You never know. You never know. All right. But today we're going to come back to the universe of privacy and security.
Yes, we will. And today we have a terrific guest. We have Brian Haugli, who has been driving security programs for 2 decades and brings a true practitioner's approach to the industry. He has led programs for the DoD, Pentagon, intelligence community, Fortune 500, and many others. Brian is a renowned speaker and expert on NIST guidance, threat intelligence implementations, and strategic organizational initiatives. Brian is the contributing author to the latest book from Wiley, Cybersecurity Risk Management, Mastering the Fundamentals Using the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Lastly, he is a professor at Boston College in the Woods College of Advanced Studies Master's Program in Cybersecurity. Brian, you had me at NIST. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Brian, can you share? We always like to start by understanding how people got to where they are today, and tell us what you're doing at SideChannel today.
So I've been in this field since high school. I got started right out of high school, working as a pen tester, and then just kind of working my way up through the ranks. You know, I genuinely enjoy computer work, IT work. I'm at the core of it really just a problem solver, and to me, technology has always been something to either build or break, and generally just kind of solve problems around. So this field just seemed to kind of have a calling for me. And interestingly enough, you can actually make money at it. So it's kind of a nice twofer where you have a passion that actually pays. So that's I don't know. It's something that I did not intend to go into this field. I wanted to be a history teacher, a high school history teacher. And we were just joking kind of off camera about how much I read. You know, I love reading about history, and I just generally love reading. And that's what I wanted to go do. And I always wanted to teach kids about history and make sure that they had the right understanding of history. But then I literally fell into this. I got recruited into it and just stayed with it because it was paying, and I kind of never really looked back at going to college to pursue getting a degree to then end up trying to become an actual like high school history teacher. So I stayed on this path, and it brought me through the Department of Defense. I ended up going to the DoD and working there for about 10 years across a couple of different agencies and programs, leading most of the time. I've always kind of found myself in a leadership role. So, kind of working up from being on the very technical side to going to the policy side to eventually leading overall programs for the Defense Department. And then I had a Fortune 500 that was here in the Boston area that scooped me up and hired me to come build and lead their program. So I had already been working a lot on NIST since its inception, implementing it at Pentagon, and then getting the opportunity to be one of the first Fortune 500s to implement the NIST CSF up here. It's probably one of the first companies to implement the NIST CSF. So yeah, that was kind of it. I did that for 4 years until I launched SideChannel. SideChannel's entire purpose was initially to work with nonprofit organizations. In fact, our first client was a nonprofit. And my original co-founder and I wanted to legally insulate ourselves to be able to basically support and help a CIO that was a friend of his. And because they couldn't afford the budget to hire on someone like us. Like my starting salary, as a CISO on the East Coast is, $300,000-$400,000 base pay plus, bonuses and stock and everything. It's not financially feasible for most organizations. So a nonprofit came along and was like, hey, we really need this type of help. And, hey, we'll pay you, just at least travel and some consulting to just give us a hand and give us some advice. We don't want to take advantage of you because you're doing this on the side. And that started it. And I was like, wow, kind of looking around, it's like, wow, there's a real underserved market here. Nobody is really helping mid-market. Nobody's helping small business, emerging tech, startups. No one's helping nonprofits. They're left to their own devices. Yet it's the exact same risks that enterprise have within cyber. So, it seemed like a really good business opportunity to just focus and build a consulting firm centered around supporting this really underserved market. Just, hey, I've done the enterprise thing. That's cool. I want to go work on something else now and that has some meaning. And that was the entire intent of SideChannel. And then over the last 5 years, it's just exploded because our thesis or our hypothesis, whatever it is, I'm not a science guy, so I always pick the wrong term there. But our idea and bet was right, that if you go and work and focus just on this underserved space, the mid-market and small enterprise mid-market and below, there are not a lot of people helping them. Therefore, there's a lot more opportunities for you as a business to be able to deliver. And, you don't generally face a lot of competition, and we don't, which is really nice. So it's been great. And it's just focusing on very much everybody outside the Fortune 1000 on helping them identify their cyber risks, build a mature and maturing cybersecurity program to address those cyber risks, and be able to articulate that to whoever's asking.
Well, Justin, I know that you want to talk about security and history today. It's going to be very challenging because Brian shared two of your favorite passions. Actually, three. We have reading, history, and security.
You're right.
I know.
I lit up when he said he wanted to be a history teacher because I want to do that and then show up as a different historical character like every week.
That will be fun. Well, Brian, I'm excited to dig in. We have the same philosophy in terms of mid-market because at Red Clover, we're seeing the same thing just on the privacy side. Lots of organizations actually first tackle security and then they seem to come along for privacy. But I know we're going to get a little bit deeper into that soon.
So talking a little bit more specifically about SideChannel, can you talk a little bit about how they specifically help their clients with cyber compliance? Because I remember meeting one of your SideChannel professionals working on a deal where it was a private equity backed company that seemed to bring you in to be helping them with multiple portfolio companies.
Yeah, we have a lot of different avenues. It's amazing. I never thought the people that you kind of have set up kind of in channel sales, what those are. I've always been a buyer and I've always been a practitioner. I've never been on the sales side until I started this company. So I've learned so much about, how do you get what you offer in front of people? And the private equity groups, VC groups, a lot of law firms, CPAs, and insurance brokers are our largest channel sales to their clients because they're generally they're in the position of trust where you're a trusted advisor to that client, or you have some type of significant influence into them, in the case of a private equity or venture capital group, where you can really kind of steer the direction that end asset needs to take. So, for us, it's been, once we get into one startup, the PE or the VC firm, this has happened a number of times, like, wait, who's helping you with your cyber program? Oh, hey, can you do that? And all these other assets that we own or we influence. So that's brought us, tremendous amount of business and, just more exposure kind of and brand. But essentially, my focus on delivery for this type of work, right? So we're now actually like the largest virtual CISO provider in North America. And the reason that we are is because I believe experience matters in this role. And we do that because I only hire former chief information security officers, people who've actually done the job at an enterprise or commercial level. When you kind of go out to market, a lot of the competition that I see, and I don't really consider them competition anymore, are people who say, hey, we're a vCISO provider. And you look under the hood and it's, one, maybe two people. They've been a director level at most, or they were a CIO. They've never been an actual chief information or a CISO at an organization. And, I think like law or privacy, having real experience in this field to be able to steer how you build a program, influence the leadership at an organization to adopt and support the cyber program that's going to go in place, that matters. That experience matters. Like if you've never briefed the board, how are you as a vCISO expected to go brief your customer's board about risks in terms that they're going to understand if at most you've done, it's very technical level types of role. You don't have an executive presence. So that's been our differentiator. And that's, I think, what really matters when you're building a program is that real, experience, the executive presence, the ability to actually lead and mature a program. So, we look at, basically cyber program as a service. It's the governance that needs to go into place, the risk assessment that needs to feed into the governance, being able to truly identify what the gaps are, being able to mitigate the gaps, finding the right risk management solutions, whether it's, acceptance or mitigation, transfer, or avoidance, although I argue nowadays, there's no way anybody can actually avoid cyber risk if you're plugged into the internet. So that one's kind of out. We're left with really three risk management solutions. So our clients view us, and I think the way that this should be done is, if we were your full-time CISO, what would you expect out of this role? But you don't need us full-time because you can't afford it. And two, you probably don't have enough work to keep us interested professionally to stay here. And that's probably why you see a lot of mid-sized organizations fail to not only fail to hire, but also fail to retain a CISO once they hire them, because there's not enough for that role to be really involved. And then you start kind of layering less, like lower level work that's professionally unfulfilling. And, as a CISO, I don't want to be answering third-party risk management questionnaires. Don't expect me to manage a firewall. That's not what this job is. People are looking for an all-arounder and they want to give them the CISO title. And that just doesn't work in this field. So, hey, take somebody for 40, 20 hours a month who is in that role, use the rest of your money and resources towards engineering and architecture, technical execution, things that are more in line with somebody who's mid-level or junior level who can action on it.
Any thoughts?
Makes a lot of sense to me. I can't tell you how many times I'm the one after I handle a breach and I'm the one telling them who to get to rebuild or start from scratch to build a whole program.
Brian, one of the things you had mentioned was about 20 to 40 hours. And one of my questions to you is going to be for a mid-market company thinking about hiring an outside firm, what was the time period that they might want to think about from a budget perspective? If it's not enough to fill interest level from a full-time, what is sort of that right part-time amount? And did I hear correctly? Did you say about 20 to 40 hours a month? So maybe is that like a quarter of a person for them to just sort of mentally think about?
Yes. So what we've done is we've actually productized our services, and we have subscription to what we do. So we sell, and all of our contracts are on an annualized basis, and our clients actually, we have very long-term retention on our clients, generally because they're not growing fast enough to be able to justify the finances to hire a full-time CISO. So our clients sign with us year over year. Because cyber is not something that you're like, okay, I got you for 3 months at 40 hours a month. You've implemented all the stuff. Thanks. Bye. We got it from here. It doesn't work like that. In fact, we've had clients who thought that, and we're like, okay, keep our number, because in 3 to 4 months, you will call us back, and, we'll happily have you come back because you thought you could run it yourself, and they do. So yeah, I think, it's kind of all size dependent and complexity dependent. If you're in a highly regulated space, if you have a lot of customers that are kind of demanding of your security posture, if you have a very interested board, or if you are, kind of what I view as post breach, right? Where the digital janitors have come in and cleaned up, and now you're sitting there going, I don't want to go through that. I wish I had the program in place that would have stopped this, or had something in the first place. Build me that. So, 20 to 40 is kind of on the low end. I mean, we've got clients that are doing 80 plus hours with us a month, because they still can't afford to get the right type of talent. And it is cost effective for them to do that. So I can't say, this is what's going to work for everybody. But generally, figure that this is going to be an ongoing risk unless you've somehow figured out how to remove cyber from your operational risk register. And if you have, please tell me how you've done that, because 25 years in this industry, I don't see anybody who's ever has. And what's the landscape look like? Are you trying to just meet and build to a program? A framework? Are you in over your head with a number of different regulations that you have to meet? I feel pretty bad for publicly traded companies that are in the finance sector or the insurance sector that are domiciled in New York, because you have the SEC, the FTC, and New York State Part 500 to deal with. It's like the trifecta of regulation. The good news is they all just ripped off NIST CSF, and they're pretty much all the same controls. But even still, you have to report to 3 different entities.
Well, speaking of one of the legs of your regulations from hell in New York, I wanted to talk a little bit about the SEC cyber rules. It seems from my perspective, and would love to hear your perspective, is publicly traded companies, and in particular, their privately held third-party vendors, don't appreciate how the new cyber rules really fundamentally shift not only disclosure, but how you have to start documenting and handling in preparation for incident response. Could you talk a little bit about, what you're seeing about how companies are thinking about the new SEC cyber rules?
Yeah. So the first part that has shocked me shouldn't have shocked me, because I've been through this rodeo before with regulation. You have organizations that are now held to a new standard, and you have a lot of vendors out there who have quickly read the Cliff Notes version of the regulation and come up with, this is what you need to do. This is it. This is all you need to do. And we can do that for you. So case in point, I have a potential client. Still don't know yet. I'm still watching to see which way they go on this. But they are a indicator of others that we've now talked to, who have been made to believe that all you have to do with the SEC regulation is get your act together around reporting incidents. And that's only one of the components of what the SEC is called for in their final rule. In fact, I think that's the easiest of the things to do that the SEC has asked for. The volume of the requirements actually centers around your ability to articulate what you have in place around your risk management, your governance, and kind of other aspects of your strategy, not just the incident disclosure component. And that seems to be missed because the headlines, the news, the talking heads, and everyone's honing in on this incident response component. And it's like, okay, once you understand what you have as an incident and you have something that you can declare because it's material, here's your timeline, and literally here's who you have to submit that to. The rest of the requirements are centered around, what type of risk management assessments have you done? What type of standards do you have in place? What type of strategic roadmap have you developed? How do you actually look at risk management? Who's in place to do this? How do you manage your third parties, your internal? What policies and processes do you have documented? What type of board oversight do you have? There's so much more to what the SEC has called for than just incident response, yet everyone focuses in on the IR component. So I think it's interesting because people are jumping to and only going to focus on the areas that they've heard about, that they can kind of wrap their heads around, but they're missing kind of all the rest of the work that needs to be done. So the way that I've looked at what you need to do is you can basically say, hey, to be SEC compliant, you can say these words: we have no cybersecurity program or process in place. That would make you legally compliant if you said that in a queue with what the SEC is expecting, because you're being very transparent to the shareholders, right? And you are saying inside of your risk factors on your 10 filing, we don't have these things in place. Okay, good. But nobody wants to say that sentence, right? Everybody wants to be able to articulate, oh, we have, we're doing all the things. Well, when you reverse engineer what's being called on to be outlined and disclosed, you start unraveling and seeing really a program that needs to be in place that hits a lot of different components. That program needs to exist. It needs to function. It needs to not just be like, oh, we did that once 3 years ago, and I think it's still in place. Oh, we wrote that policy. It's on a shelf somewhere. We're good. We have a policy. Like an auditor coming in, they're going to look and say, okay, two bad things happen when auditors come in. They look and they see the date to the document that you created was yesterday, or the date on the document was 3 years ago. And in between, nothing has ever been done. Nothing's ever been looked at. So the SEC is going to expect in disclosures, my belief is, you're showing you have a program that you've put in place. You're constantly nurturing and maturing. And you have something that's underneath each of these disclosure requirements. I mean, there's I think 14 components inside of 106 B and C that call for you to say you're doing something. And you have to articulate what that something is. 105 is the only thing. It has it's like one line where you basically say, yep, we had an incident. I'm going to file that in an 8K. Here's what that incident is. But your 10s, your regular filings, those are going to have all the 106 rules. And you're going to have to say in every single Q and every single K what you're doing. And if I remember anything from talking with SEC folks, they don't like to see that you said the exact same thing as last time if it comes up. You can't just copy and paste and be like, oh, okay, you're not maturing your cybersecurity program? Interesting. That's going to be very transparent, I think, for folks come March, when they start reading the majority of these as they're written.
So one thing I wanted to just socialize with you and our viewers is, we had in the last month the ransomware cases with MGM and Caesars. Clorox was another one where there were disclosures. And one of the interesting things that I'm seeing, or at least in my head, is let's say you have a ransomware case and you pay $15 million like Caesars did, and then you're going to file that with the SEC and say, hey, we paid the ransom, we got our network back. We're going to trust that the threat actor isn't going to put that money, that data on the internet. what's the SEC to stop them from turning around and saying, you know what, you paying the ransom, the FBI doesn't want you paying it. The Biden administration doesn't want you paying it. The SEC just turns around and whacks them with a huge fine for having done that as a kind of backdoor way of regulating the payment of ransom. Because in my experience, Brian, I have yet to have a case where the client doesn't decide that it's the better business decision to pay the ransom than to try to even restore from backups if they can. Love to get your thoughts on that. I know I said a lot.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is an area where I think I run counter to a lot of my peers on if you should pay the ransom. So the first question is it illegal to pay the ransom? It's not illegal, is it?
It is not, unless you are paying it to somebody on the OFAC list. Then it would be.
Right. And you have to know that, right? You have to know, and it has to be public, right? And you have to know that they are, on the OFAC list.
Actually, if you found out 6 months later they got put onto it, that could be a problem. But generally, before you pay the ransom, you're going to do all the diligence to really find out, because if you don't, then it's money laundering potentially. But
sure. So let's assume that they're not on the OFAC list. It's not illegal to pay the ransom. Yes, the FBI frowns on it because law enforcement doesn't want anybody to support criminals, right? The Biden administration and any administration doesn't want it because they support, right, the Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. Where I usually kind of run counter to my peers on do you pay the ransom or not is there is an ROI to the business of being a hacker and being bad. So this is a business for them, right? So first we have to accept and understand that this is no longer some kid in his mom's basement doing this. These folks have benefits. They go on vacation. They have health insurance and PTO. The forward groups, not just the developers of the software and everything, have sales quotas. They have, they have to meet certain KPIs. There is an ROI. There's a return on investment, and there is a business that is running on the other side of this thing. So if I put myself now in the bad guy's shoes and I'm purporting, ransomware, and I'm doing all this, is it good business for me to go back on my word? Is it good business for me to not give up the decryption key? Is it good business for me to take the money from the target and then turn around and say, you know what? I'm going to dish out all of your data anyway. No, it's not, because that gives a significant amount of negative brand damage or just negative brand and brand damage to what I'm trying to do. Because I want to make sure that the next guy or girl pays, and I want them to trust me that I'm not going to divulge their information, right? So it's not good practice, business practice for me as an attacker and as a ransomware gang to actually go back on my on what I'm saying. There actually is honor amongst thieves here. It's crazy, but the reality is that I think the reason that people don't believe that is because they still believe this is some kid in his mom's basement. Like, no, this is a business, and their business is getting into your business. So the faster that organizations really think about ransomware groups and attackers as a competitive business to them, and what you would do to thwart that. How do you defend your addressable market? How do you defend your customer base, your edge, your product edge? How do you defend your intellectual property from a competitor? The more you think about that in terms and applying it to the bad guys, the better off I think you are. Paying the ransom, to me, is the last resort. If my backups aren't good, okay, I have a couple choices. Either I go down and availability is down, and if I'm in manufacturing, that's incredibly difficult because I can't materialize time, and manufacturing is based on time, right? If it's anything else centered around availability, that's hugely impactful. I have to factor in that what's going to get me up faster. Do I pay the ransom and I get access back to all my stuff? Do I try to restore from backups? And then it's a technical, hope, honestly, or for most organizations, it seems like hope still that their DR and their BC planning, it was actually done well and actually works. If you don't have backups that can restore you to a known good state or even work in the first place, what choices do you have left? You're running a business. This is a business decision. Do you pay to get access back to everything? Or do you start facing the consequences of being down? That's a business decision. And as long as it's not illegal, I think it rightly still sits with the business to be able to make that decision.
Well, in addition to needing good, strong security measures for cybersecurity rules for backup so that you have a plan in case this very unique situation happens to you, there are also privacy laws that require people to have good, strong security measures globally and a growing trend here in the US. And Brian, I was curious if you can share a little bit about how you're seeing privacy come up with the companies that you're working with.
So it's generally coming up with our larger clients right after we've kind of stepped in and become the VC. So maybe we've brought in some engineering support and we start rolling out some capabilities. And that as we're learning more about the customer and their objectives and their goals, it'll inevitably kind of show up. All of our clients that are probably over $1 billion in revenue, this comes up on the heels of kind of month 2 of our engagement on security, where they're like, "Hey, since you're here, I got a couple questions about our privacy program. Can you help us?" It's like, well, we have a CISO there, and their specialty is not privacy. We can work with privacy folks. We love GCs. GCs are generally our biggest champion at our clients. They're the ones who are probably the most forward thinking when it comes to cyber risk. That is not someone who's under the CIO or the CISO at an organization. So we love the GCs, and they're generally like, "Hey, we need to kind of do this. We're working with outside lawyers, outside counsel, but there's some technical components here that we don't really feel we have our hands wrapped around. Can you help us?" And we've brought in that capability because I don't want my CISOs doing that on delivery. They already have something they need to focus on. So we have to kind of introduce, this other function, but it's very tied together. You've got, again, I'm not a privacy expert people say I am on NIST and cyber frameworks, but I know enough to know that we can support it. It's relevant to aspects of what we're doing. It relies on aspects of what we're doing, but I can't lead. If you hired me personally to come do it, I couldn't lead that aspect of a program. I'm going to tap on someone such as yourself to step in and lead kind of what those are, and then rely on me to say, "Hey, Brian, we've figured out where all of the data is, or the PII is. These are the requirements that X, Y, and Z states or X, Y, Z regulations have on this type of data for this type of client. Can we make sure that those protections are in place?" I can do that. But figuring out the high watermark on notifications, figuring out the high watermark on being in multiple states, that's like kind of the thing I've seen is, number of different states have a variety of different requirements. And of course, none of them are exact. There's some overlap. Some are more stringent than others. Like you would look to me to interpret NIST guidance or regulation. I would look to you to tell me, okay, what are we supposed to look like over here? Right? How is that supposed to be structured? Help me help you kind of a thing. So it definitely comes into play. I think the mid-market, like when you kind of start going downstream, smaller organizations, it's coming up less and less, except in health tech startups. So we see, this is usually one of the things that comes out, like immediately in an engagement with a startup. And we have a number of them that are in the healthcare space or health tech, where they're creating a platform and it's like, yep, we have PII, or we're going to have PII, or we're going to interoperate and touch PII. So how do we have to think about this as well? So that's generally the only ones where we've seen kind of startups thinking about it out of the gate. Everyone else tends to kind of get to it, which I can't believe that there can't be privacy requirements in fintech solutions or other startups in other areas until you kind of get to a larger size. So that scares me as a consumer. I think a lot of what I've done over the last 5 years has given me a real interesting insight into consumer and business products that have I mean, honestly, there's this stuff isn't thought about first or second or third. And as a buyer, that's kind of unnerving because I'm like, you know, what do you mean you're not thinking about security? I mean, there was a home there was a home security system company that we talked to 3 years ago that they had already been in play for years, and taking in personal information because it's attached to the person's home. And given the nature of what a home security system does, it wasn't ADT, but like something like that, very, very like that, who is protecting your house, you're relying to protecting your house, hadn't thought about cybersecurity. And given the nature of how their product was built and designed, you would hope that was kind of day one, consideration. Nope. Years into building, they're like, we haven't really built a program yet. I'm sitting here going, I don't want any of my friends to buy your product because I have the insight into knowing what you're not doing. And that scares me. There was a health educate or not a health. There was an education platform that we talked with, and they were like, "Hey, we cut our budgets. Times are tough, but we've rolled this product out to so many schools, and we know parents love it. But we're cutting back on the entire cybersecurity program." And I went over to a friend's house, and they had a printout of this company's product because they were using it at my friend's kid's school. And the parents, my friends, were like, "Oh, we love this product. It's great. It helps makes so easy between the teachers and the students and the parents." And I was like, "Hey, FYI, they just cut their entire cybersecurity budget to protect everything that you're relying on that goes into that platform, FYI." And like we had like a really honest conversation about like, how do you think about that now that you know that? Does that change your view of? And it does. It does change your view as a consumer. You're like, wait, I figured, and it's the same story every time I've kind of brought this up. Oh, I would have thought that they would have done this already. I thought this was like part of their culture and their capabilities. I thought this was just like, built into their product. There's a lot of assumptions that products that are out there that we rely on and use, cybersecurity is one of the first things that's being addressed because it's an expectation, and it's almost, we kind of demand it as people. And yet, it's actually not. It's not one of the top things that's addressed kind of when people are building products.
That's very true. We could probably have an entire cocktail conversation about all the interesting companies and stories that we have seen. The good news for us is, I suppose we have a lot of day job security to try and continue to help all these companies on it.
So, Brian, when you're not helping companies figure out cybersecurity, what do you like to do for fun?
I'm boring now. I used to be a pretty competitive bike racer, and then COVID hit, and since USA Cycling falls under USA Olympic rules, that all got shut down. So we couldn't even train as a team. All the races got shut down. So I've been off the bike for way too long. And I unfortunately picked up golf, and I don't really like golf, so I don't do that anymore. It's cool. I like being outside. I think that's the thing I like the most. But I read a lot. I'm surrounded by books. I generally just like, and I read things that aren't cybersecurity related. So I just finished Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point for like the second time. So I like that. Jocko Willink's books on extreme ownership and leadership. Really enjoyed reading a couple different series from him. And I'm a huge Kerouac fan. I could read anything by Jack Kerouac. It actually changed. I had a teacher back in high school that when they were kind of doling out book reports. I think it was junior year, and you kind of go through the list, and it's like there's stuff on there that you've seen, right? Gatsby, Tale of Two Cities. And you're like, no, read that. Like a lot of stuff on the reading list, like I had already read for fun. And there's stuff on there I was like, nah, I'm not going to read it. And I still remember Mrs. Maddox, God rest her soul. She took out Jack Kerouac's On the Road and handed it to me. It was like, Brian, you're going to enjoy this. I'd never heard of him before. And she was like, you are really going to enjoy this book just based on like who you are and like your nature, kind of, your zest for exploration, and you're going to like this. And it changed my entire world. Books, I think books do. And that did. And that let me, that book probably let me grow more as a person than anything else I've ever read or done, just based on like how he wrote that book and everything else. So yeah, I mean, besides, reading, I'm been married 17 years, been with my wife now 20. We met in college. We've got a beautiful, middle school age daughter, spending time with them, supporting them, and just kind of being a dad. And, I'm the CEO of a company. So, there's a lot that needs to happen in that role. We're also publicly traded. So I have quite a bit of responsibility in that position to not only my employees and our customers, but also to shareholders. So I have quite a bit to do, and I genuinely enjoy it. I like building things. So this is a new challenge. People kind of always ask me like, hey, when you're done with SideChannel and whenever that happens, where would you want to go be a CISO at? Like, where are you going to go back to being a CISO at? I'm like, I'm never going to go do that job again. Like I've now built two pieces of software. We've designed and developed and launched two pieces of software. I've built a multi-million-dollar services company. Like, I'm going to go do something like that. Like, I'm not going to go work and be the chief information security officer at some Fortune 500. Like, that's such a monolithic job to me now. Like, that doesn't seem exciting. So, yeah, I mean, we work on, we've got two software products, Real CISO and Enclave. So my CTO and I, he and I have known each other since 7th grade. He was in that same class that doled out those books. He saw me grow as a person. So yeah, hanging out with him, just nerding out on technology and problem solving. I mean, that sort of stuff. So I don't know. I used to have a much more exciting life, but now I'm in my mid 40s and I feel like I've kind of slowed down and become boring. But
I'm not sure I'd say boring. I think just different interests and different priorities. If people wanted to learn more about the software products and SideChannel and you, where should they go?
Yeah, so SideChannel.com is our website. But probably the best spot is on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post quite a bit on there. It's probably my favorite outlet. It's probably the only way that I can still try to be a teacher is through that platform. I don't really favor any of the other ones. LinkedIn seems to be the best one. But we also have a YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel called CISO Life, where hopefully I can have you all on our video and podcast and talk more about what your organizations are focusing on. So we just kind of conversationally just chit chat about cyber issues, what it's like to be a CISO, things to think about. I get asked a lot about career advice from college kids, given just like how I came into this role. So I try to talk quite a bit about that, like how to think about the role, different roles in cyber, because there are a lot of different roles. But yeah, SideChannel.com, follow Brian on LinkedIn. It's the easiest thing to do.
Well, we are so glad that you stopped here today to share more about your story, the different challenges in cyber world, and more about being a CEO. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.